welcome into another edition of Tusk Talk. I'm Brad Caldwell. I've got Kevin McPherson along for the ride again. Kevin, glad to have you once again.
Man, always good to be with you. Good to be back, Brad.
Well, man, this is there's a lot of stuff going on, and there'll be a lot of stuff that will be taking place between now and probably, I don't know, first, second week of December whenever they make this football coaching hire. And so, of course, we know that you are the basketball insider, but we know you can chop it up on football too. So we're going to talk a little football right out of the gate here. You ready for that?
I sure hope so. I know it matters around this state at all times, especially right now with this so much unknowns out there.
Yeah, there is a lot of unknowns as far as the coaching search goes. Of course, it's been very quiet around the coaching search, and rightfully so. It's just one of those deals that right now it's not time to make a hire. The Arkansas is going to LSU, to Baton Rouge this weekend. 46.5-point underdog, Kevin. I mean, have you ever heard of such a thing, especially with the Razorbacks?
No, I haven't. But if you do the quick math and you look at what Arkansas has basically been picked apart and destroyed and kicked by their last four opponents, Western Kentucky, nobody saw that coming. Nobody thought Mississippi State could do that. But you're talking the number one team in the country. It's on one hand, I'm probably not shocked, but still surprised. That's a lot of points.
It's a lot of points.
Not shocked, because bad as Arkansas has been, as good as LSU is, and they're playing in Death Valley at night. But still, a little surprised that the 46 points. That doesn't seem like the right kind of a spread for any Power 5 school, regardless of how bad it is.
Well, rumor has it that LSU would be favored by 43 over Bryant High School. Did you hear that one?
Yeah, I did.
Anyway,
that's not a good look, is it, for the Arkansas Razorbacks?
It's not. It's not a good look at all. It's been a rough year, but of course, as you know, we talked about it last week that Arkansas has made a change, at least in the coaching situation. Barry Lenny Jr. is the interim head coach, but we're looking forward now to the end of this season and really kind of getting through it and just kind of getting the 2019 season behind us, I should say. And we're just going to talk about guys, man. Let's talk about who Kevin likes. I'm going to talk about who I like, and I think I'm starting to get this thing figured out.
Yeah, there's some Lane Kiffin buzz today. You know how these things spread like wildfire, and of course his name's been in there. But today seems like it's Lane Kiffin Day around the state. And you tell me, Brad, is that what are your ears burning for the Kiff?
Well, I'm just starting to put two and two together a little bit here. And of course, putting two and two together in a coaching search is pretty dangerous. Especially when you are recorded live and people can pull this up a couple weeks from now and say, well, this guy said it's going to be Lane Kiffin and it's so-and-so. I think that Lane Kiffin is a big-time possibility in this situation. And I'm just going to throw out a couple reasons why. Number one, he's got NFL experience. Now, how successful he was in the NFL, that situation was pretty rough to begin with. The Raiders and Al Davis, of course, if you kept up with sports at all, you know that time with the Raiders, it was a tough time for anybody to be the head coach, especially a young guy like Lane Kiffin. And, of course, a guy like Kiffin who loves to goat people. And I don't know if you remember when he kicked the 76-yard field goal one time just to make Al Davis mad. I don't know if you remember that or not. Of course, they had Janikowski. He had a huge leg, and it was just kind of a troll is really what it was at the end of the day. It was just a troll when he tried a 76-yard field goal. But Kiffin –
I do remember that. He was the head coach there when Darren McFadden was a rookie.
Yes.
They drafted McFadden, and that was all refrain from using the colorful language, but it was one of those shows, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was. I do think that his time at Alabama really helped him mature as a coach and as probably as a person. I don't think that he was near ready to be an NFL head coach at 32 years old. And I don't know if you heard the story. I actually just heard the backstory a little bit on this, that Davis was bringing Sarkisian in to be the head coach. And he said, I want to see who your offensive coordinator is, because Sarkisian was a young guy too. He brought Kiffin with him, and Kiffin impressed Davis so much, and something happened. I can't remember exactly what happened. Sarkisian said, I don't want the job, and Al Davis basically said, well, I'd rather have Kiffin anyway. And so he hired Kiffin. I think Kiffin was 32 years old at the time when he hired him. So anyway, but that being said, Kevin, I think that Kiffin has benefited quite a bit from working with Saban. So you got, number one, you've got NFL experience. Number two, now you have SEC coordinator experience, but still SEC experience nonetheless, and you're underneath Nick Saban. So I think those are two feathers in his cap. Number three is that he wants this job. I think he's making it known in back channels that he wants the job. And now I'm not saying this is an Eric Musselman situation. Musselman's been totally impressive so far. But I am saying that there are some similarities there with the professional background and the fact that he wants the job, and then, of course, all the people that he's worked with. I think Lane Kiffin is a guy that he could very well be the next Razorback head coach. It is rumored that in 2007, and probably more than a rumor, that when he did not get the Razorback job and Bobby Petrino got it, he threw a fit in his office and was throwing things and that sort of thing, because apparently at the end of the day it came down to Bobby Petrino and Lane Kiffin, and they basically told Petrino, you can have this job if you want it, but if you don't want it, you can stay with the Falcons. If you want it, you got to come now. And Petrino left, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So I'll take the other side on this. I'm not a Lane Kiffin fan. It goes back not only the way he immaturely handled the NFL situation. Of course, he was a young coach. People can grow, and you know, character, though, to me kind of fleshes itself out over time. And you know, he had some misgivings at Tennessee. We know all about that. You know, you had protesters. You had you had him, you know, basically fall flat at Southern Cal. You know, time with Nick Saban to rehabilitate. He did a good job there. So you got to give people a chance to maybe mature and reflect and learn some good, you know, get some good modeling from a guy like Nick Saban, who basically runs a pro organization in the SEC. I mean, we know that, and so you know that's one guy you can get probably the best level of mentoring you could hope for on the college level. So I do leave open the idea that this guy could succeed. I just think when he's had big opportunities in the past, there have been, you know, whether it was intentionally violation of NCAA rules, even though they were smaller rules, just different things where players and other coaches felt alienated. A lot of it was immaturity. Again, has he grown from those things? Is he a guy that's ready now? I don't know that he's not, but too much negative for me. I'm out on Lane Kiffin, but you know what? I don't have a say in it. If he's the next Arkansas coach,
sure,
I suspect the ones who aren't fans of Lane Kiffin around the state and remember some of the antics are going to give him a chance. And so we just have to see how that works out.
Right.
But count me as one that doesn't like that move.
Okay, so here's another thing about Kiffin, I think, that is another feather in his cap toward him being the next head coach. Actually, there's two of them here. Number one, Hunter Yurachek, I think, even possibly put him before the board at Houston at one point as the guy, and they told him no. So there is the previous experience there with him. And then I think that, you know, there's some rumors about staff that he can bring in. And, of course, one of the names that's being thrown out there is Sam Pittman as a possible head coaching possibility. But at the same time, I think that it can be a feather in anybody's cap for them to bring Pittman back as an offensive line coach, because he was a pretty good line coach. He was a guy that recruited well here, and his lines performed well here. And I think that he could do a very good job here in the offensive line. Again, of course, looking at how it's been for the last 3 years since he's been gone, most anything will be an upgrade.
But I was just going to say, sometimes it's not just how good job a guy did, but how much you miss him when you see the drop off that Arkansas has gone through. You would have thought a guy like Brett Bielema coming in from the Big Ten was going to shore up both lines, and it just steadily got worse. And of course, we've seen the last couple of years. So yeah, I think you get to starving as a fan base for success, and you're not going to have it overnight in the overall results. But if you can get a guy like Pittman, who you've seen do the job before and know he can get it done, fans will take anything. Like, look, we know our line play is about to get better. We know our recruiting is going to get better. So, yeah, I agree with you there. A guy like Sam Pittman, if you can get him back in the program, I don't like him as a head coach. Of course, he's had a long career, 30-something years, and that's really not been – he's not really, as far as I'm concerned, he gets these associate head coaching titles. Good for him. I'm sure he's a great guy to have on staff and be at the top of the food chain, but not at the very top, not where the spear is pointed sharpest.
Right.
I'd pass on that.
So let's talk about who Kevin McPherson lacks as a guy to be a possible head coach with the Razorbacks.
Let's do that. And I don't know where people fall on this, and this guy, to me, I've always liked him when he was a quarterback at Oklahoma, coming out of the JUCO ranks, led him to an improbable national championship over Florida State. Did a good job for the most part at Oklahoma as a offensive coordinator, and ended up getting fired there, but did a good job while he was at Missouri. Their offenses were good, and now he's the head coach at Central Florida. We know that he's had a pretty good run there, 19-4. They're 7-3 this year. Not having as good a year as they did last season when they only lost a game, and but I like Josh Heupel a little bit. I'm not saying that's necessarily my front runner, but that's a guy I would take a long look at because I feel like he's been a guy that's kind of been better than perceived in what he's done at each stop, whether it was as a player, as a coach. And again, they have high standards at Oklahoma, and even though he quarterbacked there for a national title and had some success as a coordinator, people eventually as a coach, they run out of time, and especially at places at Oklahoma or at Alabama, where you're constantly under the gun to be in the national title hunt. So, I think for the most part, he's had a good career as a young coach. I have some intrigue in Josh Heupel. I'm not saying that he's necessarily a front runner, but I think I like offensive minds. I like guys for Arkansas's job because I think you're going to have some innovation in the offense. And kind of like Bobby Petrino, we saw Arkansas's height really in the SEC. The pinnacle so far after all these years were the 2 years before he left. And a lot of that had to do with his being an offensive mind, and because you're not going to out-recruit most of the SEC at Arkansas, and there's a lot of good coaches and schemes. But he was on another level, and they won the games they were supposed to. And I think if you recruit well enough and you have the right guy as the head coach, I like a guy with an offensive mind, and so I'm very much intrigued by Josh Heupel.
Okay, so when we're talking about offensive minds, obviously another one that comes up is Mike Leach. And a guy that seems to fit the profile of what Hunter Yurachek might be looking for in a head coach. What do you think about Mike Leach?
Boy, he's been successful. There's other stuff with him, and I know that he's, at Washington State, you haven't heard as much about some of the problems he had off the field. Some of the things he said, it's not major stuff necessarily, but I just, to me, a guy like him, I don't think it would be a bad hire. I'm not crazy about it. I almost prefer a younger coach that maybe has a chance to come in and really hungry, to build something. And so, that might be the one thing with him that I'm not crazy about, is that, to me, he might even consider him a retread. I mean, Arkansas is a job that's supposed to be, a better job than Texas Tech or a Washington State. And, it's so competitive in the SEC. I don't know that I'm crazy about that one. But I think they could do worse, and I don't necessarily would consider it a bad hire.
Right now, if I had to say there's a top two, and this is very, very early, again, considering that you've still got 2 ball games left and most everybody else has 2, possibly even 3 ball games left, and the fact that the SEC championship game is still in there, Heisman stuff, all of that, there's still a lot of stuff to shake out between now and the end of this coaching search. But if I had to name a top two today, it's those two. It's Lane Kiffin and it's Mike Leach as far as guys that I think would come here. Now, you have said that you're out on Kiffin and you're kind of iffy on Leach and you like Heupel. Who are you absolutely no to besides Kiffin?
Well, Pittman, I mean, I like him in the program. Obviously, giving him basically the second rung on the ladder in the program, but not as a head coach. So I'd say definitely no to Pittman. There's a lot of names floating around out there. And right now it is early, and because there's still season left, I think Arkansas is in a great spot because all these coaches that are either aspiring to make that next step or maybe reconsidering whether or not they feel that they're in the right spot at the right time and might be looking elsewhere. Arkansas is that big job that's open now. And maybe they can build some momentum and back channels with guys. But you're right. It's so early that some of the names we're talking about now, if they don't pan out, may not be names on, coming off our lips in a couple of weeks or even sooner. But what's interesting to me, it's fun to talk about, but it's also relevant, even though the season's still going. It's just an interesting spot for Arkansas to be in because this really hasn't happened. If you go back to what happened with Joe Kynes taking over for Jack Crow, that was at the very beginning of the season. They brought in Danny Ford as a consultant. He ended up transitioning into the head coaching job, a guy that won a national title at Clemson, but he was really, at that point, a retread. We saw that he really didn't do much with the opportunity. He did get Arkansas to an SEC West title one year where they got to the SEC championship game and got embarrassed by Florida. But getting back to this is a unique situation. Arkansas's got a great opportunity, I think, to figure out moving this program forward. But as far as back to names and definite no's, I think it's a little too early to put out a bunch of definite no's. I just know some of the names coming out. For me, I'm pretty close to a definite no on Lane Kiffin. I won't go 100% absolute on that. There may be a way that I continue to follow that and start to see where it might make more sense. But just from what I've seen and thought of him over the years, I'm still at a no for a program like Arkansas.
Okay, so I would try to goat you into this name, and I didn't know if you'd be yes or no on it. And again, this is cart way before the horse. But how do you feel about Gus Malzahn if he were to possibly open up?
Oh, twice burned, Brad. The guy's had a lot of success as a coach. That's an obvious statement. Would he be successful at Arkansas? Everything's relative too to what's happened to the program. I mean, he's obviously an upgrade over what's been there in the last couple of hires. But recruiting at Auburn's a much different animal than it is in Arkansas. You can recruit a top 10 class there, regardless of who the coach is. At Arkansas, it's a different challenge. He is an offensive mind. He's a guy that can scheme to win games, even if the talent level's not necessarily equitable across both sides of the ball. And I like the fact that they mix run and pass, dual threat quarterback. I think that's what's going to take at Arkansas. We haven't seen a commitment to that. I'm not a definite no on that from the standpoint of just looking at it from a true value sense, but with all the history and some of the political dynamics and some of that stuff, I think it could be a toxic situation and a split fan base. I'd have to see Arkansas maybe strike out on some other viable options before I'd think that might be. And I want your thoughts on that as well.
My thoughts are I would do a backflip if Gus Malzahn were to be able to come to Arkansas. But that being said, that's my personal feeling. I personally feel like they should have hired him in 2012, and you're probably not looking at the same mess that you're looking at right now. I think that there are so many factors that go into Gus Malzahn. That you go all the way back to the 2006 situation, and if you remember, Kevin, he was the sympathetic figure in 2006. Do you remember this?
Oh, I remember all of it. That's why I'm talking about the past and the political nature of this. It's probably not as cloudy or murky or troubling as it was obviously a few years ago when they've made other hires, but I still think some stuff lingers. But you're right, he was the sympathetic figure. But there was so much stuff going on with the Springdale Five
Sure.
and the way that whole thing played out, and he was definitely a part of that, and I would never consider him to be someone that was guilt free in that situation.
Sure. Okay, so let's just go back to this though. 2006, he's a sympathetic figure. Nutt brings David Lee in to replace him after he was named Offensive Coordinator of the Year by at least one publication. People are still sad about him leaving. He does his thing at Tulsa, 5,000 yards, or what is it, 4,000-yard passer, 3,000-yard passer, okay, that's what it was, 3,000-yard passer, 2 1,000-yard receivers, and a 1,000-yard rusher at Tulsa. And then the man goes to Auburn. And when he went to Auburn, the whole scenario changed about Gus Malzahn. Everything about how people felt about Gus changed. And ever since then, it's just been different for sure. And then, of course, you have to factor in the fact that in 2017, he did use Arkansas to get a raise. I mean, that's just the bottom line. He did use Arkansas to get a raise. And so now a lot of people haven't been able to let that go. As far as what he's done on the field, a lot of people say, well, if he can't win at Auburn, then he can't win at Arkansas. Well, let's talk about the quote-unquote can't win. He's 60-30 at Auburn, so he wins 2 games for every loss there at Auburn. He took a team that was 3-9 the year before, took them to a national championship game with a defensive back at quarterback. He has had some issues every once in a while. His offenses are bogging down, and one of the reasons that they bog down is quarterback play, which that's not a feather in his cap, especially to where we're at today. But when the man has a mobile quarterback, he's very dangerous and very good. But I think that what you're talking about, the fan base being split, I don't think that Arkansas can afford that or needs that right now. And so, unfortunately for me, a guy that has liked Malzahn and wanted Malzahn to be here at one point or another, I think that it's probably no good for him to be here right now. And so I would say I am actually a no on it now. And I know I said all those positive things to say that I am a no, but I just don't think that there's a whole lot of benefit, because I'm going to go back to the Mike Anderson situation. You and I are right in the middle of that. Mike Anderson, even in year 2, began to get his detractors. And one of the reasons that he got his detractors were people just didn't want him. They just didn't want him. And so there were people that were coming at him, even though the team was improving well, they just didn't want him. And I feel like that would be the same thing at Arkansas with Malzahn, is that you would have a loss or two here or there, and it would be, I don't want this guy, I'm mad at this guy, let's get rid of this guy.
That's the thing when there's political stuff and dynamics, and people they hold on to grudges. Fans, and I'm not singling out Arkansas's fan base. I think every fan base has these same dynamics. It's just the world we live in, especially with social media, when it's easy to fire off some hate and sometimes and it's really only a fraction of a fan base. But I think with Malzahn, because there was so much history and some back, and he's been in the SEC, and he's had a lot of success playing against Arkansas. Again, if you could separate all those past things out and those connections and some of that toxicity, if you could not even consider any of that, which is impossible to do, but if you could separate it, then obviously he's an upgrader of what they had, and he's a guy that can mend the program. But because of that stuff, and you can't eliminate it, on top of the fact that I also think winning at Auburn is easier than it is at Arkansas. It doesn't matter who the coach is; they're always lined up for top 10, top 15 classes, which means you're going to get good players on defense. You can win with a good defense and an offense that bumps along. We've seen him do that at times.
Yes,
it's just that's not going to happen at Arkansas. It's just not, and so that's another thing for me. With everything combined, you're right. I think there would be hell raising every time there was a loss, and
every time the offense bogged down.
But I'm not 100% no on him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you would be crazy to be 100% no, because in the era of Saban, he's been the second best coach in the SEC, and I would venture to say that he would be even more successful if Nick Saban weren't in the conference. I know that's not a big time stretch, but I'm just saying at the end of the day, if Nick Saban weren't here, who's the number one coach in the SEC? Well, I mean, I think people could say, well, Kirby Smart is there. But as far as a longevity-based argument, I believe that Gus Malzahn is the second best coach in the SEC behind Saban. And the reason I say that is 2 SEC West championships when nobody else has them but Saban. The fact that he's been able to beat Saban in years, I think that is as good an argument for Gus Malzahn as any. And I think when you can get that caliber of a coach at Arkansas, considering what we've had in the last couple years, I think it would be a major win. But at the same time, there's all this other stuff around you. And so you actually hope at this point that Arkansas can figure out a way to get somebody like that could have the kind of success that he could have without actually getting him, because it just, at the end of the day, there are just too many people that don't want him.
Yeah, he's done a good job. I will say this one thing, though, just one little caveat. It's not to disagree with you. You also have to remember, it doesn't matter who the coach is at Alabama, and it doesn't matter who the coach is at Auburn. That rivalry is just a little bit different. And so sometimes I factor that in on some of these wins. Now, it's tough to beat Alabama. I'm not going to say just because you put Auburn on your chest, that means you're going to, but typically those games, you can throw the records out, you can throw the recruiting out, you can throw the rankings out. And so I give a little bit of maybe some of Auburn, some of that balance in the, go back and forth just to the rivalry. But there's no doubt. Malzahn's done a good job when you take it away from just that matchup at the end of the year, your Thanksgiving weekend, and you go back and look at some of the success that Auburn's had. Like you said, 2 divisional titles. A lot of times that does come down to that Alabama game. But he would. He's an obvious upgrade to what Arkansas has gone through. But if you're trying to move the program forward, how long is he an answer? I don't think he can have the success at Arkansas that he had at Auburn. And if there's already some divisiveness in a fan base, they're probably going to expect him to not have real slippage. And it's just like the Mike Anderson thing. You had the past raw feelings, and also there's some expectation that he's going to bring back a Nolan quality that he just never could, because he's not Nolan. And I think saying that a little different here, but similar, is you bring in Malzahn, you've got the past stuff where some of the fans don't want him anyway, and then they're going to expect him to live up to some of the success he's had at Auburn. And I just don't think Arkansas can recruit well enough to consistently be that good.
Well, with the Mike Anderson situation as it is, I would say, or as it was, I would say that he would probably be a guy we don't need to have because of all of the things that go on around him. I think if you get the kind of quality of coach that he is, though, if you just put a blind resume out there and you don't put his name attached to it, most people are going to pick that resume as the guy. But at the end of the day, and I think it's funny, just to be honest with you, Kevin, as I'm sitting here talking, I'm watching the number of people that are on the video. And as I started talking about Malzahn, there was a number of people that dropped off. So that's kind of where you're at with that. But anyway, let's move on, Kevin, and let's talk a little bit about basketball. And there was a big commitment, and it didn't happen for Arkansas, which there was some thought that it would for quite a while. But Chris Moore ended up at Auburn, and I was just going to get your thoughts about that.
It's the Gus Malzahn factor. I'm kidding. Let's not lose any more listeners.
Right.
You know what? Wes Flanagan, who's, part of that Little Rock Parkview family tree, played at Parkview, but played his college career at Auburn. And his son is down there, Al Flanagan, who's a freshman there. Javon Franklin, who played at Little Rock Parkview, is down there. And those 3 young men took official visits together with Chris Moore a year ago when the NCAA started allowing juniors to take official visits. And so he took an official visit to Auburn and Arkansas during his junior year, and those were the only 2 schools he took official visits to a year ago. Obviously took another official visit as a senior back in early November, Chris Moore did. So there was so much talk about Memphis. I think for a few days Arkansas was feeling good, and based on some information I was getting from a couple of places, it started to look good for Arkansas. But at the end of it, Wes Flanagan did the job, stayed on Chris Moore for the last couple of years. Arkansas obviously had the coaching change, had some ground to make up with all of these in-state players. But for Chris Moore, he was the one guy. He took his first official visit as a senior to Arkansas back in September. He never made it back to campus. If you look at some of these other recruits that kind of been on campus on and off, coming to games or different things, he just never came back. And so you could kind of look at that as maybe, now that we're looking at it in hindsight, as one of those things that, maybe it was a kind of an indicator of his interest level. And I think Arkansas moved the needle with him. A lot of his friends are, Moses Moody, Devontae Davis are both committed. He grew up playing with Devontae. I think that had him, really considering Arkansas heavily. But at the end, we started learning Thursday and Friday that it may not be going in Arkansas's favor. And, of course, on Saturday, I think it surprised a lot of people he didn't stick with Memphis. Penny Hardaway recruited him heavily and did in-home visits, and he was constantly on campus there, just across the river for games and different things he could go on unofficial visits. But Auburn won out, and now the dream for the Arkansas Fab Five, Brad, is off the table. But I think Arkansas is in great shape to get two more commitments from Jalen Williams and Kalen KK Robinson. And we may not be calling it a Fab Five, but maybe we can call it an Arkansas Fantastic Four.
Yeah, that would be great. Now, I was going to ask you, there's been some talk that Moore and Williams wanted to play together, and of course Auburn is a possibility. I guess it's Arkansas and Auburn for Jalen Williams. And I was just going to kind of get your feelings about how you think that'll shake out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. With Moore committing to Auburn, fans are going to wonder, hey, is Jalen Williams is he going to follow him down there? They've talked about playing together. They played together this spring and summer on the Nike YBL circuit, and they did visit down there together. So I think Arkansas is in great shape. He's going to announce on Saturday, by the way. Just a few days away into the week. So we're going to find out soon enough. I think Arkansas is in the driver's seat. I think they're going to get a commitment from Jalen Williams. Now, he's talking about signing in the spring. And so people have varying opinions about that situation. Just like Moses Moody's committed, but waiting till the spring. If Arkansas can't figure out a way to get a signature from these guys by Wednesday, 2 more days, when the early period ends, and you got to wait till mid-April. And see, to me, even though these guys might be committed, a lot can happen. And so, how strong is the commitment? Does that mean even if he commits to Arkansas, coaches, schools can still recruit these guys and will, and you can't blame them because they're not signed. So, with Jalen Williams, I think Arkansas, I really think they're in the lead right now, and I'll be surprised if Arkansas doesn't get his commitment on Saturday. But going forward, if they don't get signatures early, as a fan, you've got to wonder how strong is that commitment, because now you're waiting until mid-April when they can sign.
And then, of course, there's still Kalen KK Robinson out there. And he, you talked about the two that you feel like have Arkansas has a great shot at. I assume he's one of those guys, and he'll be announcing right the Friday after Thanksgiving. Is that correct?
He's announcing it on Thanksgiving Day, the 28th. So just, that's next week. I talked to him about that, and he said it's his brother's birthday. That's the date of his brother's birthday, and it happens to fall on Thanksgiving Day. And I think that's kind of neat. He's going to announce it on Thanksgiving Day. He's down to Arkansas and Kansas. I think I'm expecting a commitment to Arkansas. He's saying that he's probably going to sign in the spring, and Arkansas could very well end up with 4 commitments. Now, Devontae Davis, the first one to commit, the 6'4" point guard out of Jacksonville, he's going to sign his letter of intent on Tuesday of this week, tomorrow. And I'll be at Jacksonville High School for that. But he's the only guy that's confirmed a signature for the early period. And so, Musselman, I think, looking like it's going to be 4 commitments, 1 that's signed. So, really, you've only got a one-man class in this early period. Commitment is a word that doesn't mean what it used to in recruiting. I'm not saying that these young men will waffle. I'm saying we've seen enough of that in recruiting. And you've got 6 more months to go, roughly, before they can make it official at that point. I mean, anything can happen, and so you just got to keep an eye on it if you do get those commitments, and understand as a fan that nothing's in stone until it's signed. And we see kids get out of signed letter of intents too these days. So recruiting is just a shaky thing with the transfer portal and all the kids moving around. Once they're with the program, you have to look at recruiting not only as an early period high school thing. You've got to look at the spring and that transfer portal and senior grads and guys coming in that have to sit out a year. We see Arkansas's got 3 of those right now when you count Connor Vanover, J.D. Notte, and we'll call him Bebe. Yeah, so I mean, it's just the new way that recruiting works. It's not just the front end success, but what can they do in the spring to shore up a class.
And I would assume that Arkansas is going to be looking in that transfer portal for a guy to fill that 5th scholarship spot there with what they thought might have been Chris Moore at one point or another.
And that's the thing. There's only 4 scholarships available right now. So getting 5 guys signed, if they could have gotten them signed or committed, is not a big deal because players are going to be leaving at the end of the year. The average last year was 2.4 players per Division I school that transferred. That was the average. And we look at Arkansas every year. They used to love to blame Mike Anderson for not being able to manage his roster and keep guys. Well, the problem was, that was part true. The part that was true was that he didn't utilize the transfer portal and didn't have an answer for when guys transferred. But the part about guys transferring was not a Mike Anderson problem. It's a national situation. Right. It's just the reality of the sport now, the college basketball game. And so if they could have gotten Chris Moore and the other 4 Arkansas kids committed and signed early, they would have been won over. But that's a problem that will take care of itself in the spring. In fact, I'll be surprised if Arkansas didn't have a couple of openings in addition to the 4 scholarships they have right now come springtime. So, it's just a situation where Arkansas still got, I think Musselman's going to be smart if he tries to have a balance of highly rated high school players and guys transferring in so that he's got a good balance and a good mix. Because if you remember, Mike Anderson loaded up on 6 freshmen year before last, and you saw the results last year, very up and down, one of the youngest teams in college basketball, very inconsistent. So I think the reality now is a guy like Musselman, who's got all that NBA experience, Brad, he understands how important it is to not only have a good draft of young players, but also to work that free agency market and get some veterans. You've got to put a team together, and you don't want to be lopsided one way or the other.
Yes, I'm with you 100% on all of that. All right, so let's move on to what's actually going on the court right now. And I have to say that I'm pretty blown away, not necessarily because they aren't playing, top teams, although, Montana was a team that has been to the NCAA tournament recently, won 25, 26 games, I think the last 2 years. But the defense has just been phenomenal. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but it was actually the ACC that tweeted out something that basically said Virginia was the only team since 1948-49 that had allowed their first 3 opponents of the season to be below 50 points. And, of course, Arkansas has done the very same thing in their first 3 games. So they're one of 2 teams since 1948-49 to do that.
Yeah, I saw that. They were right. Arkansas is obviously at the big boy table too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the defensive turnaround. What has been the key factor, you think, in just the defense being? I mean, it's just been more solid and better than it was under Anderson so far.
Well, the scouting is a huge part of it. First of all, I think Arkansas's personnel is set up to have a good perimeter defense. We saw it throughout the preseason. We're seeing it now. So I think that was already an advantage personnel-wise. But Eric Musselman, he came in here, and he is known as an X's and O's guy and a guy who puts a lot of time and loses a lot of sleep scouting other teams. And he has some very innovative ways, not only that he scouts, but how he conveys what's important to his teams in preparation. And so a lot of times you see coaches that maybe are strong at one thing, but they're maybe not as strong at communicating, or maybe they're not as strong in inspiring, or maybe it's this or that. And so, but this guy seems to, after all these years coaching the pro level, and he's had success, is being able to put it to go from not only his own scouting, but putting that into a format where the players can get it. These teams that are coming in, they know the strengths and weaknesses of each one of these players. And they're in position, the way that they guard guys. Sometimes it looks like they're giving a guy space. It's because they are. They've looked at percentages. Do you want to give him space? Is he a poor shooter? Do you shade him to one direction where he's not as effective? They look at all of the advanced stats. And so they break things down. The players, it's built into their heads in practice as they prepare. Mason Jones talked about it the other night about the scouting. And I think because it's a couple of things, the personnel is set up, I think, from who they are. I mean, look at Jimmy Witt. This is a guy with plus arm length at 6'3". He is a lockdown defender. They put him on Montana's best player, who's led that team in every category, putting up big time numbers. And Jimmy Witt guarded him most of the time and did a great job. That was Saeed Pridgett the other day against Montana. But just one example. So I think the personnel is a good fit to play good defense, and I think Musselman's work in scouting and getting his players to understand what's got to be done game to game is the other part of that. And I think that's why we're seeing such a disruptive defense, is because players that have tendencies and things they like to do are not comfortable because Arkansas is taking it away. And when you're taking it away and all five men are locked in and kind of sharing the same brain, and I think that goes back to the coach as well. You got to give the players credit, but I think also the coaching. And I just think that when Arkansas gets into the SEC, teams are going to have scouted them. They're going to figure out some of their weaknesses, and we may see some drop off, obviously, as the talent gets better and they get scouted. But right now, you're seeing Arkansas just have its way on that end of the floor. And it is kind of a surprise, Brad, because Musselman comes in as a pace and space offense guy. He's had good defensive teams at Nevada in some areas, but not this good across the board. And I think now we see now that he is a complete coach. He's not a one-trick pony. He's not an offensive coach. He's just a basketball coach and a damn good one. And I think Arkansas right now, is getting some love based on what they've done on that end of the floor. And I don't think anybody saw that coming.
No, I can say that with all honesty. No, we've talked about him as a pace and space guy and a guy that was really known for his offense. Nobody really talked about his defense coming in, but you're right about the scouting and how that he just basically has everybody scouted out in the ways that he's basically, he's one of those guys that if you're a left-handed guy, you're going to be pushed right. If you're a right-handed guy, you're going to be pushed left. But it's a lot deeper than even that. And he does a great job of scouting. And the guys, after the game on Saturday were basically gushing about that. And, of course, you were in the press room about that. Can you let us in on that a little bit?
Well, first of all, I want to say this, and we just talked about some of the factors there. I think another thing that stands out for me is when you get into the early part of the season, sometimes you have a week between games, sometimes 4 or 5 days, and people will say, well, he's got more time to prepare. What happens when you get to the full meat of the season, the SEC, 2 games a week, sometimes you have a 2-day turnaround. Well, guess what? Other coaching staffs have the same time frame, and I think because Musselman had all those years at the pro level where you play 82 games, more than that when you look at preseason and playoffs, you got really quick turnaround. So he's used to that, and I think it's going to be an advantage no matter what the turn times are. But getting into the players and the media being impressed, I think the biggest thing with Musselman is he's playing chess with everything. It's not just on the court, it's off the court. The ideas he has to invigorate the program, to get the Arkansas name out there nationally without even really having been on the court yet, so with some of the stuff that he's doing. It's great marketing, but I just think he understands. How Bobby Petrino was really a one-man coaching staff, right? I mean, he had a bunch of yes guys under him. I'm not going to say the same thing with Musselman. He's got some good coaches under him, but I think he does reach out to others to get ideas and consult with a lot of different folks. But look how many hires he's made. He's treating this like a pro organization, and if you're going to have success in a pro-type organization, it does start at the top. He's not just the head coach, he's the CEO, and I think that I think aside from the X's and O's on the floor, it's off the floor. So none of this is really surprising me right now. I mean, from that standpoint, I'm thinking, well, this is a guy that has shown me he's got it together. So why would I be surprised that they're coming out and executing like this? The offense hasn't been as good as he'd like, but when you're winning the other end of the floor the way that they are to this point, they can figure some things out on offense because the defense has carried them. But yeah, I mean, everybody's amazed. You're right. You go into the press room, you talk to the players. The feedback I'm getting from behind the scenes from family members, everybody's like, "Wow, man, wow, this is real."
Well, and going back to the football search, it's got to give you faith in what Hunter Yurachek can do on bringing in the right hire, because this so far has been an absolute grand slam.
Yeah, well, so it's early. This team's going to struggle. We need to see if Reggie Chaney gets not only cleared soon, which I expect he will. He may even play tomorrow night. I was hearing 3 games minimum, so that's over with. Let's see if they're ready to clear him. But he's a guy that really needs to embrace what it means to be a college basketball player and really do the work off the court, and not just in practice, to make himself better. Because you want a pro coach, you want to play at the next level, then you got to do your part. But Arkansas needs him, and they don't have a lot of size even with him. Adriel Bailey so far has been off the charts. So impressed with him, but it's not enough, especially when you get an SEC play. Arkansas is going to need more from a guy like Reggie Chaney. So there's still question marks there. Grand Slam, maybe a little too early to say that. So far, it'd be hard to argue that this has not been a great hire. And I just look at when I go back and really think about all the different people I've talked to who've known Musselman when I was doing my research when they were getting ready to hire a coach, and I thought he might be the guy, or he was in the top 2 or 3. Every coach, these NBA guys, a lot of different people, they all to a person said no one's going to outwork him, and no one's going to be better at X's and O's in preparation. And so far, that's true. And that's where coaching can make a difference if talent's equal. Arkansas probably doesn't have the talent right now that a lot of schools do in the SEC. It's going to take him some time. But look, we've been talking about this recruiting class. It's going to be a strong class if he gets all 4 of those guys on campus and hits that transfer portal. I'm sure he'll get a couple of guys that can help. And let me just tell you this. Everything I'm hearing about J.D. Note, the transfer from Jacksonville, is that he's a player. He's going to be a good player for Arkansas. We know Connor Vanover is going to be a good player. You got to think at least one of Mason Jones or Isaiah Joe is going to be back next year. But Arkansas's got some pieces now, and what they're doing in recruiting to build. And you're right, though. Musselman could be that X factor, and if they get the talent, look out.
I think that's what's going through everybody's head right now. Of course, Razorback fans are starved for a winner, and we have talked personally about what it could be on the basketball court. And boy, I think there's something that Hog fans can be very excited about coming very soon.
I'm sorry, Brad. You cut out there.
I was just saying that we've talked about what it has been on, or what it could be on the basketball court, and I just think that Hog fans have something to be excited about very soon.
Yeah. I mean, this guy has a lot of ideas, and not only embracing the history of Arkansas, the rich history. We're seeing some of that, but at the end of the day, it's about wins and losses and how you get to that finish line. And just putting up these numbers right now on the defensive end, I mean, it's getting some national buzz. The players, these high school players that he's recruiting, they see this stuff, man. Every time I talk to them or do an interview, what the weirdest things that these local kids are saying is not only do they feel like they're being made a priority, not are they impressed with their presentations, but they said it's like night and day comparing it to the previous teams here at Arkansas. And so, take that as a slight if you want from Mike Anderson. I respect the job Mike Anderson did, but this is another level. And so, yeah, I think Arkansas fans are going to be rewarded. I really do.
Yeah, and as beaten down as this fan base has been when it comes to the 2 major sports, they deserve a winner at some point. It's something that Arkansas people take pride in, is the Razorback program, and especially the basketball and the football programs. And when they're better, it just makes everybody else in a better mood.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And baseball's been a big success. Arkansas fans really want the football program to aspire to that top tier of the SEC. I just think that's so hard just because of the recruiting disadvantages. And, I really think that basketball is a sport. If you want to say of the top, the top 2 sports, that's the one that Arkansas can be that sidekick to Kentucky in the SEC, which is now a strong basketball conference. The right person in place in this program can elevate Arkansas to up there, just like Nolan had it. I'm not saying he'll be as good as Nolan or that another coach will be as good as Nolan if Musselman has some success and moves on. What I'm saying is Arkansas can be that sidekick. They can be the Robin to Kentucky's Batman in terms of perception in this league, which is now a good league again. And that's saying a lot, I think. I mean, there's really good coaches, and I think Arkansas can be that program. I don't think football can consistently be that. Basketball can. and maybe Musselman's the guy to do it. But, I think the fan base, just like they did when Nolan had it going, will feel like it's a basketball school again. They'll have that excitement. And we know what Razorback fans do when you're winning big and you're nationally relevant. And that's what's been missing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk real quick about what's coming up tomorrow with the Razorbacks taking on Texas State. You got any thoughts about that game?
I feel like Arkansas is going to be 4-0. Right now, I really you always worry about these mid-majors, but right now, I'm not one bit worried about it. I tell you, the one thing I do have a little bit concern about, and it's for down the line. When you play 7 guys, and I know they get Chaney back, they'll have a more of a 8-man rotation in some ways, but guys are getting heavy minutes in that backcourt. Isaiah Joe, Mason Jones, 35 plus minutes most nights. I think over time that can, and especially a team that relies on the 3-point shot and some perimeter firepower. I think over time, especially when you get into the grind of the SEC, and thinking more in terms of the final stretch, the second half of SEC play, a little concerned about these guys with all these minutes and what it does to their legs and shooting when you're playing in a competitive league like the SEC. Right now, I don't think it translates to losses, but they're beating teams down pretty good. I don't see that Musselman's real comfortable getting extra time in for a guy like Ethan Henderson to save some minutes on legs for guys like Isaiah Joe or Mason Jones. I'm not telling him how to coach. I'm just saying some of those things I think later could be something to keep an eye on. So no concern with this opponent tomorrow night. More so, let's see if the minutes change. Let's see if Chaney's back on the court, and let's see if they start dipping down on some of these minutes. But so far, man, he's not afraid to put guys out there for long stretches.
Yeah, I think he came in with a philosophy of 7, 8 guys, basically max as it was, no matter how talented his rosters were. Is that correct?
Say that again.
He basically came in with the thought of, and I think this is just how his philosophy is, a 7, 8-man rotation, no matter how talented the roster is.
Yeah, he one of the things is he likes veteran teams. He likes guys that can consistently do the things he wants. And so if you're on the cusp and you're not fully ready to deliver what he's looking for, you're not going to play. And then we saw that last year with the McDonald's All-American at Nevada. So I mean, you're right. That's part of the equation with him. That's why when you get a big in-state class like Arkansas had this year, you've got to go after those guys. The question on the flip side is, and they're so talented. I think these guys aren't going to have a problem getting minutes, but you never know who's left over and how that shakes out. But I think that the way he sees it, he can get. He feels like guys can play those minutes. And we're going to find out, man. We're going to find out if Isaiah Joe, Mason Jones, Jimmy Witt continue to play big minutes. Does that do anything as we move to that final third of the season? But yeah, 7 or 8 guys. It's really been the mantra since he's been a college head coach.
All right. Well, Kevin, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I guess it's about time to wrap this thing up. And we just want to say that if you're watching now or you're watching later on, share this thing with your friends and let them know that Kevin McPherson, basketball expert, but really expert on all things Razorbacks, is here with us talking some Razorback football, basketball, and whatever else that we can chop up here within an hour. And so, Kevin, we really appreciate you joining us once again for Tusk Talk, and hopefully we can do it again next week.
Good, always good to be with you, Brad. Thank you.
All right. That's Kevin McPherson of Arkansas Hoop Scoop. You can follow him on Twitter. You can also see him on hogville.net and KARK, KNWA, all of these things. He is a part of that. So we're going to say goodbye for now. We're going to say thank you for watching Tusk Talk, and we will see you next week.